Good morning. Welcome to the Peninsula Multi-Faith Coalition's 9th annual MLK Day Junior Multi-Faith Day of Service. Wow. I am Pastor Connie Winter-Yulberg. I'm the pastor of St. Andrew's Lutheran Church here in San Mateo, and I have the great honor of being the president of the board of the Peninsula Multi-Faith Coalition. The coalition was founded in 2012 and is a group of 28 faith organizations representing all major world religions, working together on projects to improve our community. The MLK Day Junior Day of Service is our largest event, but we also coordinate many other events throughout the year, including a multi-faith song fest, prayers for peace, anti-racism discussions, speaker series, and a book group. Our mission. The Peninsula Multi-Faith Coalition brings together our diverse faith communities to build bridges of understanding and respect. We stand together with humility to acknowledge our common values, learn from one another, and serve our wider world. This last year has been difficult. There have been great division in our country. I have seen over and over again that the PMC has been greatly needed in this time. We are an organization of connection and relationship building. We gather as diverse people. We are eager to learn about others that are different from us. We are a group that works for peace. Join me in celebrating all the PMC staff, volunteers, liaisons from faith organizations, and our board of directors who come together to bring into action Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.'s goal of peace, nonviolent protests, prayers, and actions to bring justice to all people in our country. In one of his final books, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? King showed us that race was part of his broader concern with human relations at large. He said, "This is the great new problem of humankind. We have inherited a great world house in which we have to live together, Black and white, Easterner and Westerner, Gentile and Jew, Catholic and Protestant, Muslim and Hindu. Because we can never live apart, we must learn somehow to live with each other in peace." The PMC is really excited to have our 3 speakers today who will be sharing about their connection with the messages of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. As with many things during these times, our day of service looks different this year. Please bear with us as we navigate this new format and the technology around it. Please welcome Alexis Lewis, who will now introduce our speakers. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Alexis Lewis, and I'm a member of Island United Church. Thank you for your leadership, Pastor Connie, and a huge thanks to all of the volunteers. We appreciate you performing today's services in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King. We have 3 guest speakers this morning, and they're all members of our community. Our speakers are committed to using their talents to work in public and community service. And this morning, they will share with us their thoughts on how the teachings and beliefs of Dr. Martin Luther King are relevant today. Our first speaker is Reverend Lori Owens, the president of the San Mateo NAACP. She's also the assistant pastor of His Gospel Christian Fellowship in Oakland and the chief technology officer at the San Mateo County Office of Education. The NAACP Hawaii State Conference recently recognized Reverend Owens with the Lulan Sant McGriff Award for her work with the branch and in the San Mateo community. Reverend Owens' church provides care packages to the homeless each month. The packages include sandwiches and fruit, water, clothing, dog food for dog lovers, flashlights, umbrellas, and tarps. Reverend Owens is the first woman and African-American to serve as the chief technology officer in the state of California. She has taught inspiring CTOs throughout the state for more than a decade. Reverend Owens has received numerous awards for her work in education and technology. She's a popular speaker on digital equity and transformational leadership issues at educational technology conferences throughout the nation. She is a former chairperson of the statewide technology steering committee, as well as a past president and current member of the California IT and Education Board of Directors. Mrs. Owens received, I'm sorry, Reverend, I should say Reverend. Reverend Owens received her bachelor degree with honors from Cal State University East Bay and completed her graduate work at the University of San Francisco. She's also studied at Holy Names University and the Trinity College of the Bible and Theological Seminary. Reverend Owens is married to Reverend Dr. Owens, who is the senior pastor of His Gospel Christian Fellowship and a retired bank vice president. She and her husband raised adult grandsons, Antonio, who is now a minister and an educator, and her youngest grandson, Leonard, is a college sophomore. She is the stepmother of two, has 4 additional grandchildren, and a family of kitty cats who adopted her and her family about a year ago. I'll turn it over to you, Reverend Owens. Can we hear her? She's muted.
Reverend Owens, we'd ask you to unmute yourself. Thank you.
All right. Yes, I was trying to. So thank you very much. Good morning. I bring you greetings from the San Mateo branch of the NAACP. I am Reverend Lori Owens, a new cat mama, and that's a whole nother story. But I appreciate and thank you for your invitation to speak this morning to such an esteemed group of people. Today, as we celebrate the life and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, we look upon the fact that he only walked this earth for 39 years, but his words and his wisdom reached through the decades since he has been taken from us. And what he had to say is so relevant to us today. Many of us are familiar with Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, but there are a few other quotes that he left us that I want to touch upon this morning. The first one is, and this is a quote, "We must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools." And this was being, I think, pointed to by the comments of Reverend Connie. The United States, much to the chagrin of some of our citizens today, is a multicultural society. Whether our ancestors came here on an immigrant ship, came here on a slave ship, whether they crossed the border at the south of the United States or flew here from some other distant land, the reality is that we are all here now. No one's going back to anywhere else. We are citizens of the United States of America. Although we have different experiences, views, and philosophies, the one thing that should root us all is our belief in and our defense of the Constitution of the United States. Unfortunately, we as Americans have struggled with the concept that the rights afforded by this Constitution applies to all Americans. What we saw at the Capitol on January 6th and the broader issue of white supremacy in this country reveals a deep struggle with that concept. But unless we as a nation firmly reject the idea that the rights enjoyed by virtue of being an American citizen are just for some and not for others, we will indeed perish together as fools. As the Bible tells us, a house divided cannot stand. We all know of Dr. King's views on nonviolence. He once stated, quote, "Violence as a way of achieving racial justice is both impractical and immoral. I am not unmindful of the fact that violence often brings about momentary results. Nations have frequently won their independence in battle. But in spite of temporary victories, violence never brings permanent peace." End of quote. The truth in Dr. King's statement has never been more evident than today. Violence begets violence. We saw violent protests. Some of the protests were violent in the summer after the murder of George Floyd. We saw violence last week at our nation's capital. We're preparing for more violence with 25,000 troops protecting on this Wednesday what should have been the peaceful transfer of power. We have thousands of more troops who are protecting state capitals across our nation. Where does all of this violence get us? Absolutely nowhere. Dr. King once said, quote, "Rarely do we find men who willingly engage in hard, solid thinking. There is an almost universal quest for easy answers and half-baked solutions. Nothing pains some people more than having to think," end of quote. Again, how apropos that statement is today. It's so much easier to believe lies and conspiracy theories than to seek out unbiased information and think for ourselves. We cannot, as a nation, move forward by abdicating our right and our responsibility to engage in hard, solid thinking. We have only to look to dictatorial regimes throughout history to see how that will end. Lastly, I'd like to close with Dr. King's words where he said, quote, "I refuse to accept that the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daylight of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word," end of quote. With all of the hatred and injustice that we've seen in our nation, especially in the last 4 years, I join Dr. King in refusing to believe that this is our ultimate fate. For me, the gathering that we have today, and indeed the gatherings that we see today throughout our nation in honor of Dr. King, is a prime example of this. We must continue to stand for justice, but to do so in truth and in love. We must continue to make that good trouble that John Lewis talked about. Dr. King described us as disciplined nonconformists who are dedicated to peace, justice, and brotherhood. So I'd like to thank each of you for being disciplined nonconformists, people who are unwilling to be silent in the face of institutionalized injustice, people who are willing to take a stand for right, not only in times of comfort and convenience, but also, as Dr. King would say, in times of challenge and controversy. I continue to thank you for your dedication to peace and brotherhood. Thank you for your service to this community. Be blessed.
Thank you, Reverend Owens, for being here today and bringing us that beautiful message. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Senator Josh Becker. Senator Josh Becker is a public policy innovator working at the nexus of community activism, technology, and social justice. He was elected to the state Senate in November 2020. Senator Becker represents the residents of California's 13th Senate District, which comprises most of San Mateo County and the northern part of Santa Clara County. Josh's commitment to service crystallized when he traveled to war-torn Guatemala to work with refugees in the early 90s, and later started a basic school for repatriated refugees in El Salvador. In 2000, Josh created Full Circle, a community leadership and policy innovation organization that funds nonprofits, creating positive change in the Bay Area and building civic leaders for the future. He's been the driving force for Full Circle, which has supported policy innovations and community organizations and economic opportunities, education, environmental sustainability, and health. Appointed by Governor Jerry Brown, Josh served 7 years in the California State Workforce Development Board, and he served on the Child Care Partnership Council in San Mateo County. Josh is also a founding trustee at the University of California, Merced. Josh has long been a champion in pushing business to create social good. In 2011, Josh joined Lex, and I'm going to probably butcher this, Machina, which has a mission of bringing openness and transparency to the law. As CEO, he grew the company from a Stanford University public interest project to a nationally recognized platform. Most frequently, he founded a legal technical accelerator to support entrepreneurs who want to innovate in our legal and public policy system. Josh earned his JD MBA from Stanford University in 1999. While a student, Josh co-founded the Stanford Board Fellows Program, which trains students to serve on the boards of local nonprofits, engaging them in social progress at the beginning of their careers rather than at the end. Senator Becker is a 20-year resident of Menlo Park, where he lives with his wife, Jonna, their 2 children, Leo and Aaron, and their family dog, Percy. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexis. Thank you for that warm introduction. Thank you for your friendship, and good to see all of you. It was good to be with you last year making things, and we'll look forward to being together in person again at some time in the future. Thank you so much for the Multi-Faith Coalition and the organizers. It's a great honor to share the space with Congresswoman Spear, who will be speaking with you later, and Reverend Laurie Owens, who we just heard from the NAACP and her tremendous role as CTO. It was great to hear from you. And your words make me think of many things now, Alexis, and how Dr. King has inspired me in my own life, from that service in Guatemala that you mentioned to when I came out here to get deeply involved in the community of East Palo Alto and get to know our friend Larry Moody, who I've worked with, to this day. And, I really spent the weekend thinking about what Dr. King means to me. And it's funny that we live in Silicon Valley, where we're always looking for the latest app, the latest technology, the latest convenience. And it's amazing, right, then how Dr. King's words still resonate so much with us and have never gone out of style. They are timely and as relevant today as they were in the 60s. The last years made it clear, especially the last 2 weeks, have made it clear that although we lost Dr. King decades ago, we as a nation have so much to learn from him about struggle, about equity, about compassion, about understanding. There's so many events that have occurred in the past year that shone light brightly on the inequities and difference in value streams that exist in our nation. The 1-2 punch of the coronavirus, police brutality, followed up by the Black Lives Matter movement, and to shine light on economic injustice. We had a very turbulent 2020. But where there's light, there's opportunity to see cracks and flaws where we need to build up and grow in order to do what's right. And Dr. King's quote about light then comes to mind. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. So I'm in my first month of serving as a senator from the peninsula. It's a diverse area, as you know, from South San Francisco to Sunnyvale. And I hope to use Dr. King's lessons in my service as constituency, serving with love, serving with light, serving those who need a voice, and using my voice to help where I can. And also today I was reflecting on his economic message, which sometimes doesn't get as much attention. But in 65, kind of at the height of the Voting Rights Act and such, he said at Ebenezer Baptist Church, where we've now elected Reverend Warnock, the former pastor of that church, to the Senate in Georgia, which is a remarkable statement that shows how our country does continue to move forward despite our difficulties. But he said, I still dream that one day all of God's children will have food and clothing and material well-being for their bodies, culture and education, for their minds, and freedom for their spirits. He said in the Other America speech, it's much easier to integrate a public park than it is to make genuine integrated public education a reality. It's much easier to integrate a lunch counter than it is to guarantee a livable income and a good, solid job. It's much easier to guarantee the right to vote than it is to guarantee the right to live in sanitary, decent housing conditions. The things he said it's easier to do. We're showing we still have to fight for those things today, including the right to vote. But we have much progress to make on the other areas I mentioned in public education, housing, livable income. He said in that speech, I was listening this morning, we can end poverty in the United States. Our nation has the resources to do it. The question is whether the nation has the will. And that is still the question for all of us today. In our military today in this country, we spend $746 billion. $746 billion. It's $2 billion every day. Here in California, our budget is $220 billion, budget that will be voting on this year. So we have the resources, as Dr. King said, to fulfill the economic promise of his mission and to lift up the African American community. Now we will see if we have the will to do it. So as we move forward in 2021, I hope that you, along with me, will continue to serve with that light in mind, sunlighting problems that you see, working collaboratively towards solutions, and putting others first as we all work towards a more equitable future. Dr. King said we can all be great because we all can serve. And thank you all for your service to your community and allowing me a chance to speak here today.
Thank you, Senator Becker, for that wonderful message. And thank you for being here with us this morning. Our next guest speaker is coming to us via video, and it's our 14th Congressional District Congresswoman Jackie Speer. She's provided a video because she's busy with, there's a lot of things going on in DC, as we all know from the news. But the most important thing is the upcoming presidential swearing in of our president, Joe Biden, and our very own Bay Area Vice President, Kamala Harris. So those are good things to be in Washington for. Congressman Speer grew up on the peninsula and is a devout Catholic and longtime member of St. Bart's Catholic Church. She's made a lifetime commitment to community and public service. She is a fearless fighter for women's equality, LGBTQ rights, and the disenfranchised. As she has dedicated her life to eliminating government corruption while working to strengthen Americans' national and economic security. She was named to Newsweek's list 150 fearless women in the world and one of Politico's 50 most influential people in American politics for bringing the Me Too reckoning to Congress. Crusading for the safety, health, and rights of all Americans is one of Congresswoman Speer's driving core principles, from getting tough on big banks to extending taxpayer bailouts and from eliminating wasteful and fraudulent government spending at all levels, and serving as a check on the federal government in the fight against corruption. As the chair of the HASC Subcommittee on Military Personnel and members of the House and Intelligence Committee, Congresswoman Speer is committed to keeping the United States secure from terrorists, foreign and domestic, and hostile nations, and honoring and supporting our veterans, military service members and their families. This means ensuring that American troops have the right equipment to do their job and save taxpayer money by fighting for improved cyber defense and sound management practices at the Pentagon. Congressman Speer received her BA in political science from the University of California at Davis and her JD from UC Hastings College of Law, along with her husband, Barry Dennis, and her children, Jackson and Stephanie. She is a proud fan of the San Francisco Giants, the Golden State Warriors, and a lover of all things California. She enjoys any activity that allows her to spend time with her family, including their much-loved puppy, Emma. I think someone's going to play her video, but I want to just thank Congresswoman Speer for taking time out of her busy schedule to create this video for us.
Today. It's my privilege to join you for the 8th Peninsula Multi-Faith Day of Service on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Thank you to the board president, Pastor Connie Winter-Uhlberg of St. Andrew's Lutheran Church, and Pastor Lori Owen, assistant pastor at His Gospel Christian Fellowship Church, and San Mateo County NAACP president for inviting me. Thank you also to the hundreds of volunteers who are participating in today's event to knit caps and blankets and make sandwiches. You know, the pandemic has changed things this year, but we are still driven by the same spirit. Community spirit is the glue that holds us together as neighbors, as human beings. Giving a helping hand lifts us all. Dr. King personified community service and encouraged it through his actions and his powerful words, including his sermon where he intoned, quote, "Everybody can be great because everybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to know Einstein's theory of relativity to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love, and you can be that servant," unquote. It's hard to believe he was only in his mid-20s when he answered the call to fight for civil rights as the head of the Montgomery Improvement Association, which led to the Montgomery bus boycotts after the arrest of Rosa Parks and secured desegregation of that system a little more than a year later. He followed that success by organizing the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, creating a national platform in the fight for equality. He was only 34 years old when he delivered his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech at the March on Washington in 1963. And he was just 39 years old when he was taken from us by an assassin's bullet. Only one day after he had delivered his "I Have Visited the Mountaintop" sermon. His call then to, quote, "rise up with a greater readiness, stand up with a greater determination, and move on in these powerful days, these days of challenge to make America what it ought to be. We have an opportunity to make America a better nation," unquote, is as relevant today as it was in 1968 and still inspires us all. And his words of wisdom from his letter from the Birmingham jail, which you will read later today, still ring true. Quote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere," unquote. It has been more than 6 years since Michael Brown was killed by police in the suburbs of St. Louis, and Americans marched on the streets to call for justice. 6 years later, and we're still making the same plea. Yet Black Americans are still 3 times more likely to be killed by police than white Americans. From Breonna Taylor to Tamir Rice to George Floyd, at least one Black person will be killed by police every week between January and August in 2020. The systemic racism, disparate treatment under law, and growing wealth gap that plagues our country were made even more jarring by the impacts of COVID-19 on employment and housing insecurity. These long-standing crises have pushed so many of our neighbors to the brink. You know, I saw it firsthand at food drives where I was helping out. Families lining up for food who had never thought they would be in a food line. Seniors who usually volunteered at these food lines were in line themselves because of their heightened vulnerability to the virus. Small business owners holding on by the fingernails to save their livelihoods, many of them unable to do so. Parents scrambling to work from home while helping their children with distance learning. And in lower income households, suffering a dual blow, the loss of employment as well as educational opportunities for their children that were substandard. As painful as the last year has been, it has reminded us that service to communities, country, and one another is more important than ever. As Dr. King once said to an audience in Montgomery, Alabama in 1957, quote, "Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" Unquote. By being here today, all of you are answering that critically important question and ensuring that we are able to overcome this pandemic and the long-standing injustices that have been laid bare by this crisis of leadership that has gripped our country for 4 years, but that is indeed coming to an end on January 20th. May God bless you for your dedication and work today and going forward, and may God bless our great country.
Ah, yes, that was wonderful. Thank you to all our speakers, Congresswoman Jackie Spear, Reverend Lori Owens, and State Senator Josh Becker. We are grateful that you have been able to spend time with us today. You have shown us that the words and actions of Martin Luther King Jr. are still an inspiration to us. Reverend Lori Owens talked to us about that violence never brings peace. And State Senator Josh Becker talked to us about that Dr. King's words never go out of style, that we have the resources that are needed to help with economic justice for all people. But do we have the will, he asked us, do we have the will in order to carry that out? And then Congresswoman Jackie Spear talked to us about community spirit as the glue that holds us together. And we certainly understand that at the PMC. We know that the 7 religions that come together in the PMC, that we have learned about each other, we have understood each other, we get to have a relationship with each other, and community service has been a great help in doing that. I want to thank everyone who has helped plan this. This has been hard to do this year, to help plan and organize this year's MLK Day event. Especially, we want to thank our part-time staff, Dana Eisenson and Sue Blackstein. Thank you. It took much extra effort this year to reimagine how we were going to provide opportunities for our volunteers that could be completed online in the safety of our own homes. We appreciate everyone's support and your flexibility. And we encourage you to send feedback by completing our volunteer survey, which will be sent out to you tomorrow morning. We also encourage you to take photos and share them with us at peninsula multifaith@gmail.com. So that's peninsula multifaith@gmail.com. I want to just give you a schedule reminder for today. From 10 to 12, there are projects. For online projects, you should have received a separate Zoom link from your project captain. But if you need help to find your Zoom link, you can go to the PMC website. So that's peninsulaMultifaith.org, where there's a whole list of Zoom meetings. Also, the education session that's following this will be streamed on Facebook, but you can also see it right here on Zoom. So you don't need to move, don't change your Zoom invite, just stay right here. And a reminder that from noon to 2 p.m. today, you can drop off your fleece blankets, your paracord bracelets, your knitted and crocheted baby caps, and your face masks at St. Andrew's Lutheran Church at 1501 South El Camino Real in San Mateo, on the corner of 15th and El Camino. Also from noon to 2, you can drop off your cards and flowers for the senior centers at the Congregational Church of Belmont at 751 Alameda de las Pulgas in Belmont. Thanks for coming today and being part of the MLK Day of Service. I hope that you find your rest of your day very meaningful. I'm mindful of what one of MLK's quote, he said over and over again, "We are better together." Have fun with your projects. And for those of you who are attending the wonderful education session coming up, please stay right here on this Zoom session. Thank you.